I was kneeling beside an old man when his son walked in and decided I was the problem, no questions asked, no pause between anger and action. The slap landed fast and clean, stinging across my cheek, echoing off marble like the house itself approved. If it were you, what would you have done? Swallow it and leave, or stay and fight for the one person in that mansion who couldn't fight for himself? My name is Maya William. And this is the day a house built on money and silence learned how to tell the truth. Picture a foyer the size of a church. Cold light sliding across colder floors, portraits watching from the walls like judges who never retire. I'm holding a glass of water to Harold Whitmore's lips, steadying his hands, whispering, "It's okay, breathe with me," when the main doors blow open, and his son Ethan strides in, all hard shoes and harder jaw. "What the hell are you doing with my father, Maya?" he spits, like my name is something he needs to get rid of. Before I can answer, she appears at the stairs, silk robe, perfect hair, a wine glass that never seems to empty. "Camila." She doesn't raise her voice, she points it. "I warned you about her," she purrs, always whispering, taking liberties. Then the slap, quick enough to make the world tilt warm, shock spreading across my face, a taste of metal I try not to swallow. Harold tries to speak and can't, a tiny sound caught in his throat, and the only sentence I can form is the one that will haunt this house for months. Sometimes the truth doesn't knock. It bleeds. "Pack your things," Ethan says, finger held like a verdict by sundown. Camilla slides her hand around his arm the way people do when they want you to see who's driving, and they wheel Harold away like I'm something spilled on their floor. I walk outside because it's either that or let them see me cry, and yeah, I cried in my old Honda, the kind of tears that make your ribs ache, the humiliated kind, the why me kind. Then I saw his face again in my head. Harold's, the way he looked at me when the room got loud, like I was the last calm patch of water on a choppy lake. If I leave, who protects him? Who keeps the door open when everyone else wants it locked? That's when my spine remembered it had a job. I wiped my face, went back through the side entrance, and walked straight to the security room. The security room hummed like a low storm, a dozen screens blinking, the kind of blue light that makes time weird. I used the emergency key the kitchen manager once showed me for when the power goes out, and started scrolling. You know those moments when you want to be wrong so badly, your stomach hurts. I watched Camilla tilt a bottle to Harold's lips and say, "Drink," with a voice that doesn't allow refusal. I watched her yank his arm down the hallway when he moved too slow. I heard sign the papers hissed through teeth meant for smiling at guests. I copied the clips to a flash drive with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Brave wasn't the word that night. Necessary was. I was easing the door closed when he appeared, blocking the light like a final exam. "Ethan." Same suit, less heat in the eyes, but not by much. "You were told to leave," he says. I hold out the flash drive. He looks at it like it might explode. "What is that?" "Proof," I say, and a question you've been too angry to ask. Why does your father cry when nobody's looking? He doesn't trust me, not even the length of a breath. But he takes the drive anyway, maybe because something in the air shifted when I said the word cry. That night, I slept in my car with the seatbelt as a blanket and the parking lights for company, and I prayed, not fancy, just honest, that somebody in that house still knew the sound of truth. Morning was soft, the kind of light that asks permission before it enters, and for the first time in weeks, the house didn't fight it. I carried a tray to Harold's room. Oatmeal with cinnamon fruit cut into small, perfect cubes, because his hands shake less if the pieces are neat, Earl Grey, because he likes the smell even when taste is a stranger. He looked brighter, not fixed, not new, just more himself, like a window finally wiped clean. Ethan walked in without armor, a blue shirt instead of a three-piece apology. "Am I interrupting?" he asks. "Only breakfast," I say, and I watch a thought step across his face, careful like a deer at the edge of a field. He sits, watches his father take 2 slow bites, clears his throat. "You have full autonomy over his care," he says. Each word chosen, no reporting to anyone but your judgment. I wait for the hook. It doesn't come. I watch the footage he adds, and the room finally exhales. From that day, I had keys to rooms I used to clean from the hallway, and a responsibility I'd already taken long before anyone granted permission. The house warmed by 1/2 degree. Not summer yet, just less winter. That's when the house started giving up its secrets. It began in the attic dust and moonlight, and that little round window that makes the world look like a snow globe. I found a trunk leather cracked at the corners, inside a stack of letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate, sometimes shaky, always stubborn. "My dearest son, Eleanor, Ethan's mother." She wrote about pressure and appearances, about the difference between being admired and being known, and she left a line that cut me open in the softest way. "If life gives you a choice between someone who wants your name and someone who sees your soul, choose the latter." I brought it to Ethan at 2 in the morning. He read it under the attic window, and I watched a CEO turn into a son right in front of me. "I never got to say goodbye," he said, voice small in a big room. I didn't say I'm sorry, I just sat with him, because sometimes the fix is presence, not speech. Wait. It gets louder. The East Wing parlor labeled off-limits because of asbestos remediation that somehow didn't apply to Camilla's cocktail hour, had a floorboard that rang hollow when I tapped it. I slid a letter opener under the edge and pried up a plank. There was a metal box wrapped in wax paper, like someone believed in time travel. Inside, a deed, 30 years old, stamped and signed by Harold, assigning the southern vineyard to Eleanor, not to Camilla as she'd claimed. History bent into shape by someone's need finally unbent by a piece of paper that had been waiting for a better day. I put that deed on Ethan's desk. He looked at it the way a person looks at the photo that explains their whole childhood, equal parts relief and grief. "We fix it," he said, and the way he said, "We told me the house wasn't his alone anymore. We called everyone to the central hall, not a performance, a reckoning. Staff lined the walls, the gardener who never speaks unless plants are involved, the cook who hums when she's nervous, the driver who pretends he doesn't see things to keep his job." Ethan stood there with hands that trembled just a little, which is how you know he meant it. He said he saw the footage. He said he believed what he saw. Then Camilla swept in, late lipstick, perfect smile, sharper than glass. She started her speech, the officers ended it. No cuffs, no push, just a simple, quiet walk toward the door that led to the end of pretending. "Do you think that's fair? To be judged by a room you controlled for years?" "I do. Yeah, that happened. But listen, the arrest wasn't the finish line, it was a doorway. Stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind." 2 days later, we got a call from Chicago, a long-term care facility, the Whitmore Foundation, funds. A man checked in under a fake name tattoo of the family crest on his shoulder, said he needed to talk to Ethan, or to me. Marcus Langley, ex-personal guard, the kind of person houses like this hire, when they need problems handled off the books. He sat by a window with hands that shook from memory, not fear. He pulled a photo from a folder and passed it to Ethan. "Your mother," he said, and there she was, young alive, smiling with her whole face. Then he told us the thing that flipped the world. She didn't die naturally, he said, voice rough like gravel. Camila slipped something into her tea, I knew. I let it happen, I took the money and shut my mouth. The room went still, the kind of still that makes clocks loud. Ethan didn't scream. He went quiet, which is always scarier. We brought Marcus's signed statement to the district attorney, and if you've ever watched a machine wake up, you know the sound the courthouse made that week. The inquiry opened fast. Phone calls got returned faster. Not everyone smiled about it. The board behind the Whitmore Trust tried on a neutral face. Donors worried out loud about optics, and Camila's sisters drove up the long driveway like a thunderstorm that forgot rain. You had no right, one of them hissed, and I almost laughed because people who've had all the rights for too long say that line a lot. Harold rolled his chair into the hall, looked at them, then looked at me, and said the only sentence that mattered. She saved me. That's when the room chose sides, and for once it chose well. The house kept teaching us. In the archives, we found a folder stamped confidential that led to a fixer in D.C. A man named Gregory Shaw, polished smile, polished suits, foundation money flowing quietly through shell nonprofits like water finding the lowest place. Ethan and I sat in a beige government room under fluorescent lights and laid out the paper trail. Emails, call logs, a letter from Camila promising the vineyard would be hers once the old man dies, a line that tasted like pennies. Gregory tried to laugh us off. He used housemaid like an insult. I used evidence like a door he couldn't close. Back home, the preliminary hearing felt like weather finally changing. Judge Rowley doesn't waste time and doesn't perform. Ethan testified first, not as a billionaire, as a son learning how not to be blind. Then me. I told them what a locked door looks like from the outside, what a bruise looks like when it's hidden under a sweater, what it sounds like when a grown man whispers, "Please don't leave me at 2 a.m. The prosecutor asked if I believed I overstepped my role. Silence would have been the greater crime, I said, and I meant every syllable. Harold spoke after me, voice steady in a way it hadn't been in months. I mistook charm for care, he said, and I let my pride be louder than my wife's memory, and the room was so quiet, even the HVAC didn't dare kick on. The judge found probable cause on elder abuse, fraud, obstruction. Assets frozen. Joint stewardship. Ethan and me. My name next to his on a legal document, and for once it wasn't a scandal, it was a correction. Not everything came easy. Jerome, the groundskeeper who can grow anything in dirt, but doesn't think truth needs sunlight, slipped into the archives at midnight and lifted a folder. He didn't destroy it. He held it until he could tell us his philosophy like a sermon. Not every shadow wants daylight. Some things keep a house standing. I asked him what the house was worth if people got crushed to keep it upright. He didn't answer, he just handed the file back, and maybe that's an answer too. Let me ask you, would you keep the lie if it kept the roof on, or would you let the rain in and build something stronger? Trial day came with rain left with light. Miss Beck, our attorney, is allergic to theatrics. She set the timeline like a table, careful, no wobble, no flourish, just facts you can't push over. Gregory took the stand like a man who had always been clapped for and discovered silence, then questions, then the way paper can testify against you when you wrote it yourself. The jury didn't take long. Guilty, the foreman said, on conspiracy to defraud a charitable institution, on elder abuse and coercion, on attempted misappropriation of estate assets. No one cheered. We breathed. Ethan's hand found mine, solid, grateful, human. You know what I mean. The kind of hand squeeze that says we made it across the river without losing the bag we came for. After the verdict, the work didn't end, it finally started. We pulled the curtains open on the foundation's books, not a press release, a practice. We built a board with seats for the people who actually keep the lights on, the cook, the head of grounds, a rotating community chair from the neighborhood that used to stare at our gates like a wall. Scholarships were renamed for Eleanor not as Polish, but as penance, and we set up a new fund for caregivers who get crushed between wage work and love because truth without repair is just exposure. Harold started asking for jazz at breakfast again, which is a sentence I forgot my mouth could make, and one afternoon he watched us hang Eleanor's portrait back in the central hall and said quietly, "She's watching again, and a house that had been a mausoleum felt like a home for the first time since my first day there." I moved into the South Tower suite eventually, a room no one had used in years. Dust on the windows, patient light, a small desk that knew how to hold weight. First line in the journal I kept there. There is power in silence, but greater power in voice. On long days when the old board tried new tricks or the press wanted to turn our grief into content, I read that line and then I went back to work. We planted a new row in the vineyard and named it Restoration Row because vines teach you what people forget. You cut back what's dead, you feed what's living, you wait. And one morning green shows its face like it always meant to. It just needed you to stick around. There's one more piece, and it matters not because it changes the verdict, but because it explains the ache under all our choices. In the attic letters we found a name, Margaret. Not a friend, not a cousin. The person Eleanor trusted when the house required her to pretend. We wrote to a Vermont address, and an 82-year-old woman answered in handwriting, graceful enough to hush a room. She gave Ethan a small gold ring his mother meant for him at 25, inside engraved, "Even in silence I see you." He held it like it could evaporate. He didn't need to speak. Some kinds of justice don't happen in courtrooms. They happen when the story stops lying about love. So here's where I hand the mic to you, because the end of my story is the beginning of a real conversation. Should families with power be allowed to handle their sins in private, or do they owe the truth to the communities their names touch? When a woman speaks up in a room built to ignore her, do you believe her right away? Or do you wait until the footage is undeniable? If a person is dead, do we let the harm they caused stay buried with them? Or do we dig, even if it means tearing up the lawn where everyone picnics on Sundays? Do you think that's fair? To strip a legacy down to the studs so something honest can grow back in its place? If it were you, what would you have done that first night? Walk out after the slap, or walk back in and pull the truth up by the roots? Tell me, and tell me from your real life, not your best self. Because for me, this wasn't about being a hero or making headlines. It was about making sure the people who caused the pain didn't get the final word. It was about an old man finally sleeping. Without fear, it was about an engraved ring that told a son he'd been seen even when the house tried to erase him. It was about a portrait restored to a wall and a rosebush we named The Witness. If you're still here, thank you for listening to a story that started with a slap and ended with a key. Drop a comment with where you're watching from, but more than that, drop what you think. Agree, argue, bring your story of when you stayed quiet, or when you spoke up and paid for it, or got paid back with peace. Share this with someone who needs a little courage today. Subscribe if you want more true, messy, healing stories told without the marble. And tell me the truth you think the world is finally ready to hear. Because this channel isn't just for stories, it's for the people who lived them.